Um, you know something? There has been a lot of conversation about so many guys who do SQL Server, not just SQL Server, SQL as a language as a whole, who argue about the correct way to be able to store a query. Let me show you what I mean, okay? It has got to do with the fact that you may have to be able to respond to one of two things. Either you're going to be embedding a query such as this in your code, or alternatively, you'd be able to create a view or create a stored procedure. Now, the difference between a stored procedure and a view is fairly simple. It's the word create a view or create procedure. Either of these would create for you a view, and that view would be called whatever you've named it over here, or it would create for you a stored procedure, and that stored procedure would be created for you as you've named it over here. Both of them would perform exactly the same function as your query would. So here I've just pulled a simple join between suburbs and an applicant for a given solution, and when I take this as it stands and run it, you'll notice that it takes that 0.1% is because of the fact that the data is no longer in cache, even though there's 29,000 rows. If I run it the second time around, you'll notice that it goes by as fast. Now, if I was to take the view which I've created and run it, it runs as quickly. And if I run the stored procedure as it is, you'll notice that it runs about as quickly as well. So there's no true performance difference. If I was to take either of these, if I was to take that one and say, let me take a look at the estimated execution plan, about 66% of it is the actual table scan, and it uses the clustered index. It finds what it's looking for. If I was to say, let's take a look at this one and say, let me take a look at that estimated execution plan, there's no difference at all. And if I was to take this and say, display the estimated execution plan, once again, identical. So the difference between these three things is that if I was to be inside of Excel, and in Excel I was to put together let's call it an SQL statement in any of these things. So if I was to take a look at a similar SQL statement somewhere else, I would have put in a SQL statement in here, which would be equal to this statement. But really, when it comes to the code inside of Excel, whoops, the wrong one. If I take a look at the code inside of Excel, the difference is that instead of a lengthy select statement that looks like this, I think they're doing a select statement like that is far simpler. It takes up a lot less space. It's far more easily readable. I know what the outcome is going to be, and this returns the data set directly, while the stored procedure doesn't necessarily do so. I have to add an additional 1 or 2 steps before being able to extract that data. So for me, if I'm changing any of the data, if, for example, what I'm busy doing is assembling, for example, a change. So in this case here, I'm doing a merge to see if there are tenants who have changed any of the details, and I'm looking at particular columns where this could have changed since the last time around. I would be able to then update it. If there are new tenants which have been added, I'll then be able to do an insert statement. And if there have been tenants which have been deleted in the source table, then I can go and delete them in my destination table as well. This is a classic example of where you would use a stored procedure because you're making changes to the environment. If you were just going to be pulling information in and what you're wanting to do is make a change to the data, then you're using a stored procedure. If what you're looking at is just pulling out data as it stands and viewing it, it's a view. But if you're going to be passing in parameters and say, I want to look at a given vendor for a given period and I want to put in here a period statement, then inside of here, it would then be logical to be able to say, I'm pulling this in as a date. And this would then pass a parameter to a view which it doesn't allow, in which case you would be creating a specific kind of stored procedure, which is the table valued function. And in that table valued function, you'd be able to create the same thing that you've done on the other side, but this time around be able to pass a query in. So where you would have said where the a given date, where some date to the other, date deleted or date whatever is equal to at and the parameter that you've said. So if you had put passed a value in, you'd be able to do an at deleted is where you'd pull that. So you'd be able to then say, I can extract data in that way. I hope that makes some sense to you guys. I know that often enough there's this big argument, which is really unnecessary, I feel, about what is the right process. Should I just use a select statement, write it from my code and use that? Or shouldn't I be using a SQL Server view? Or shouldn't I be using a stored procedure? Or can't I just query the SQL Server tables directly? Yes, you can do any of them. The question comes down to the programmability and the effort required to be able to manage somebody else's code, review the code, and in my case, I reckon the music in the language lies in the simplicity. So don't write an essay when a poem could have worked. Don't write a poem when a paragraph or two would have worked. Simplify the information. And there is some music in that space. Hope you enjoyed that one. Looking forward to seeing you in the next.